But the next question we asked was what's a godly trait, or what's a trait for godly parents that sticks out to you, or that we would like to each pursue as we are raising godly parents. And I think the first thing for me that I'm having to strive for, but also practice, is modeling humility. And I think some of the problems, whether it be in our marriages and our parenting or even churches, is passivity. And sometimes we become so passive, even when it comes to admitting fault or taking accountability. Especially men, we want to perceive like, or disseminate like we're always the smartest one in the room, or we have all the answers. And something that the Lord's been very pointed with me is, hey, admit when I'm wrong. Don't be too big to apologize to my children. And you guys know, because we all have, funny enough, Dad, everybody on here except for you, we all have girls, two girls, two girls, two girls. And so, sometimes us
Uh,
guys can be a little bit more gruff. And John, by the way, they have their 35th anniversary today. Um,
oh, congrats.
30,
Yeah.
35 years old. But anyway,
35.
35. But anyway, so, you guys probably know I've had to really watch my tone, because one of my girls is the girl, she's the fighter of the group, and then the other one's super sensitive. And so sometimes it's not necessarily about what I'm saying, but how I'm saying it. And so I've had to really model humility and not only actively look to apologize or ask for forgiveness to my children, but I've also had to do it a few times for my in front of my girls to my wife, and say, "Hey, Dad was wrong," and then see them, let them see me apologize to my wife. I think is important too, and so trying to create a culture of humility of, hey, I'm not too big to apologize. I'm not too big to confess sin. I'm not too big to not take accountability. And I think so many times as parents, we want to put on this pride facade like, oh, everybody needs to do it except for dad a lot of times. So modeling humility, I'd say, is the godly trait that I am aspiring to. John, what says you?
Yeah, I think a lot of like traditional traits kind of spring to my mind, but I think the one that I've certainly seek to work on, and I think it needs to be a part of every family, is parents that are primary worship leaders.
Mm,
They're prone to worship, and I think maybe some of the epidemic we see in the church, as far as the exodus of millennials, certainly, that left the church, and prayerfully we're seeing Gen Zers return to the church. But I think we've done no service because worship was done primarily with the body gathered rather than in homes. And
mm,
so I think a trait that I would like to see cultivated across the parents that are part of our faith family, those that would strive and, as you were talking about earlier, see the generational faith baton passed. I think surely it happens when we gather together. But additionally, I think seeing parents take on the trait and responsibility and role of the primary worship leader within their family, and seeing those things really begin to flesh out in the hearts and lives of people. If you find parents that are passionate worshipers, even outside the gathered church, you typically find kids that become or develop a heart for devotional worship to the Lord. So I think that's primarily one of the things I see.
that's good. Paul?
Yeah, this is one that I'm trying to um, work on myself to be able to instill just a little bit more and more into the hearts of our kiddos. And that's just to have a gospel driven vision, to help them see that not only are they a part of a greater story, but knowing how to be able to answer that question of how are they part of this, greater story that God is working out in this world. And so on the one hand, it's like giving them a really big vision of like everything that God is up to and doing, and inevitably culminating in, so it's just like, hey, we're part of a big kingdom. We're part of something that God is going to renew. We're part of something that is going to be everlasting, and we'll be able to enjoy with God forever and ever and ever. And so it's not only having that as part of how they think about, big storyline, but then how that has a way of shaping them right here today and every day, and how God is using them, and prayerfully will in the future, of how they have a part in that story to be able to reach other people with the gospel, to know that God left them on this planet to be able to reach others with the greatest message that we've ever known, and that's that God's proof that He loves us is Jesus, who died for us, and then to show that He's victor over death, hell, and the grave, He rose again, right? And so, just helping them see that there is something far much greater than themselves, and how they have a piece in this. I'm also learning through it with JT English's book, Remember and Rehearse. I don't know if you guys have heard of that book or not, but it's basically the same thing of just allowing yourself to ask those deep questions of what is your story and how do you play a role in it. And so yeah, it's still kind of conceptual in my mind. How do you teach that to a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old is probably too soon, but certainly as they get older is to help them know this great redemptive thread that God is working towards is going to be neat. So anyway, that's a gospel driven vision.
Sure.
So
Dad, you want to take us out? You've seen a lot, given a lot of advice, seen a lot of different parenting styles. What sticks out to you on this topic?
Well, I think I want to talk about the overarching. It's something that we all know, but I think it needs to continue to be said, and that's just intentional discipleship for your children.
mhm.
We're talking about the details, but we cannot forget that the overarching, because that's the day to day, being intentional every single day to teach what is the most important thing in life, the foundational principles. And so, and that is creating and looking for opportunities. I know it with Joseph, Pam and I would try to create situations to teach. We would look for situations to teach. And when you're looking and creating, you usually don't miss those moments. And so it's having moments, creating moments, and then having a direction that you're taking your children. And so, I always think it's to remind yourself that you have to be intentional in discipling, because if not, culture will disciple them. And so we've got to push back. They're going to get enough culture. We need to be intentional in disciple them in all these areas. And then one aspect is always important to me, and that is being a servant and being selfless. In today's society, it's always about me. What am I going to gain out of it? And that's even true with church and even with Christ. What is Jesus going to do for me? He saved me. I'm worshiping. I want the glory. And we don't ever say it, but sometimes our intention is all about me and what I can get. And so I think it's hugely important in the society that we're living is that we push back that life is all about me. We're called to die to self. And we're supposed to give our lives away for kingdom purposes. And so that's something that has to be taught intentionally, because, again, going back to culture in this world, that it's always going to be about me. And so we have to push back against that and say, no, my life is a sacrifice unto the Lord, and I'm going to give it away. And so I'm going to die to self. I'm going to be selfless rather than being selfish. And that's something that I think parents really need to hone in on their kids and even themselves. That's something that we will always have to fight against, is the notion of being selfless rather than being selfish.